Okay, to handle this function, you have to realize we need to use a relative factor, sometimes referred to as a quick factor, because you're given a profit is increasing not every year, but every 11 years. So the base format of this function is P for profit, with P naught being the initial profit, and I'm going to use the beta. This is different than B because this is not my factor, this is my relative factor, beta, t to the n, where beta occurs every n years. In this case, we know that beta is going to occur not every year, but every 11 years. So n is 11. Now, we're given a rate, a little r, big R, of 186%, giving us a little r of 1.86%. This is not my yearly growth rate. This is the growth rate every 11 years. So beta, since I'm growing, is bigger than 1 by 1.86. So add 1 to 1.86, I get 2.86. And now I have my exponential function. The initial value of profit is 927. My relative factor beta is 2.86, and beta is occurring every 11 years. So this is my exponential function. Now, next aspect is what is the yearly growth factor. Remember, beta is not my yearly growth factor, it's my growth factor every 11 years. So to get my yearly growth factor, I need to have it in a yearly format, which is P to the P naught B, which is going to give me a factor for every 1 unit of t. This is my standard exponential format. There are 4 pieces to an exponential function. I'm rewriting my formula, and I'm going to identify all of the pieces of my exponential function, but I'm going to identify it in this format where I have an input variable, an output variable, an initial value, and an annual factor. So my input variable is t. T is not part of the factor. Now I have an 11 in the denominator, which means to take the 11th root of 2.86. So it still has to say that. So I'm putting a 1 just so we can see that in the numerator. Now, t is not part of my factor, it's the input variable. My output variable, p, is not part of my factor either. The initial value of 927 is not part of my factor. There are 4 parts of an exponential function: input, output, initial value, factor. I have identified input, output, initial value. Everything else must then, by definition, be the factor. So there is my factor, and I'm going to plug that into my calculator and take it to the 10,000ths place. So I've already done that. 2.86 raised to the 1 over 11 is 1.1002. 10 hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths place. Since this number is smaller than a 5, I round down. Now that is my yearly growth factor. I'd like to know the yearly growth rate. The rate is how much my factor is bigger or smaller than 1. This number here is 0.1002 units larger than 1 in decimal form. If you want it in a percent form, it is big R, which is 10.02%. So I've identified my yearly growth factor and my yearly growth rate in decimal as well as in percent form. Last question, when will the profit reach 2,000? Now I'm going to use my calculator to get this answer. So we're going to use a graphical technique. Okay. So we want our profit to be 2,000. I'm going to plug the formula in. There are two ways you can plug the formula in. In this format, which is the exact format, or we can use this format since we know B is 1.002. I'm going to use the exact format because it's the exact format. Always better to have it perfect. So I have my output equals 927 times 2.86 raised to the input variable over 11. So this is my function. Now I've got a couple things. I'm starting at 927 and increasing by 186%. 100% larger would be twice as much. Twice as much as 927 would be 1800. So 186% larger is almost 3 times larger. So when I multiply this by 3, I'm going to get a number bigger than 2,000. So what does that tell me? My window. It's definitely going to happen after time 0 because I start off at 927, and it's definitely going to happen before 11 years. Y value. Okay, my lowest Y value starts off at 927. And I'm expecting my profit to be larger than 2,000, so let's do 2,500. And let's do a scale of 100ths for the Y's. And hit a graph. Trace button. I'd like this to when the profit reaches 2,000, so I'll just move to the left, to the right until I get to 2,000, which happens somewhere between 7.957 and 8.07. If I'd like it more accurate, I'm going to zoom. Number 2 is in, and now hit enter. Trace. And again, now I'm between 8.04 and 8.07, which is still not clearly to the 100th just yet. So what can I do? I can zoom in again to get more accuracy. And I'll hit trace. So now my answer is between 8.045 and 8.052. This is clearly too big. I would round it down to 8.05. This is clearly too small. I would round it up to 8.05, both of them to the 100th place. So my correct answer to the 100th place is 8.05 years.